recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions for both Mr. Butters and Ms. Feinberg. I'll try to be brief, and if you will, too, we should be able to get them in. My first question is, Mr. Butters, do you feel like you have the methods, the technology to test the material integrity of the steel in the tubular goods that are going into pipelines around the country?
Are you talking about testing the actual material?
Yeah, I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about the seams and the lines and breaks, but the actual integrity of the steel that's going into that tubular good. Quality does vary around the world, I found it, having done a little business in that business.
As part of our, on the pipeline side, as part of our inspection program is to look at materials of construction and ensure that operators are using.
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the material integrity of the steel that's in that pipeline, not the construction and the weldings and the fittings and the bells and all the whistles. I'm talking about the integrity of the steel.
As part of our inspection process, we do look at the materials that are used for the pipeline themselves, the steel itself.
And you have the technology to test the quality of that steel?
We have the expertise, and we utilize available technology to determine the quality of that material, yes. That's part of our, in fact, as part of our investigations of pipeline accidents, we take the damaged segment of the pipeline and send it to a metallurgist to determine the causal factors related to the materials.
That's after the fact. You have an inspection prior to an accident or a disaster.
Yes.
On the material integrity. You have the technology and you have the methods, you have the expertise that you can test the quality of the steel.
Two ways we do that. We, through our own inspection expertise of our inspectors, as well as looking at the records of the operator and what materials they're using in those pipelines.
Well, I'm told that, you basically do rely on what the producer and the user supplies you, but that you do not have the technology to inspect the material integrity of that steel. Is that incorrect?
I guess we'll have to maybe talk about that more specifically, because I'm not sure exactly.
Well, you told me you look at the records of the producers and the users. Well, that's one thing. I mean, that's, what do you think they're going to tell you?
Well, our inspectors are engineers, and so they do have experience in pipeline.
Okay, well, then if you've done all this, do you find any difference in the material integrity between foreign steel and domestic steel?
There are issues associated, yes, there are issues associated with the quality of pipelines that operators use.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Feinberg, with regard to bridges, I come from the land of 10,000 lakes. Interestingly enough, with regard to Keystone, one of the arguments is that in opposition to it is if we didn't have the Keystone pipeline, the tar sands fields of Alberta wouldn't be developed. Somebody forgot to check, because that horse left the barn several years ago, and I've got 21 million barrels of oil coming across the border at International Falls from that area each year, over a 100,000, over a 107-year-old bridge, and several dozen train loads. And I read these reports in the New York Times and other places about all the 100,000 or more bridges. Do you have any idea or estimate of how many of these bridges are deficient and what it might take in terms of cost and inspections to get up to speed on this thing before we have a disaster? The bridge I'm talking about, separates the Rainy River from the Voyageurs National Park. 107 years old, 21 million barrels of oil coming. It's a great concern to all of us.
The bridges themselves tend to be owned by the railroads, and the railroads are ultimately accountable to make sure that they are safe and have been maintained. FRA has a staff of bridge specialists that then audit the safety programs that the railroads have in place to make sure that they are maintaining and inspecting their bridges.
Well, from what I read, there's like 100,000 bridges, you know, that haven't been inspected. The railroads, again, the fox are guarding the chicken coop here. You got like 8 inspectors, I'm told. I mean, each inspector would have to inspect about 10, 12,000 bridges a year. Do you have any plans for beefing up in your own mind, you know, what we might be able to do to have a better method of checking the territory, the technical capabilities and/or deficiencies of these bridges?
Well, the reality is that we do not have the we have not been tasked with inspecting all of the bridges in the country, the rail bridges in the country. We've been tasked with auditing and monitoring the railroad's own inspection and maintenance programs.
Yeah.
We are actively hiring a few additional bridge specialists who can act on that, and we are now looking at whether we should hire some additional folks on top of that. But for the time being, you know, the railroads themselves are actually responsible for.
Yeah. You think it's prudent to have the railroads responsible for the bridges as opposed to not having some kind of a federal inspection plan?
Well, the railroads tend to own the bridges, and if the bridges are not maintained and are crumbling, then one would think that it would not be safe for their own cargo to be traveling. So I don't know if it's prudent or not. We would be more than happy to throw additional resources at this if we can in our budget.
Thank you, Ms. Feinberg.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Mr. Duncan.